What's going on, guys? Hip Paws here, and in this video I'm going to talk a little bit about parallax occlusion mapping. If you look in some of my older videos, you can see where I actually went through and I used a 3D model and baked it down and created a bunch of masks and things from it, and without touching any painting ended up with a model here, a material here. And what I have set up now is parallax occlusion mapping on this material, which means that if we take a look over here, you can see over on the side I have this kind of like a nipple thing. It's supposed to be kind of like a hinge point for this like clasp thing where this would like fit into something, right? Just a little knob on the end of that. Well, with bump offset and under normal circumstances, considering that this is a completely flat surface, as you can see right here, it's dead flat. There would be no way for these pixels to actually ever not be drawn. Well, that's not the case anymore. As you can see, they're gone because I'm looking at it from the side. And that's parallax occlusion mapping. Parallax occlusion mapping basically just takes care of actually occluding the pixels that should be behind something. And what we do is we get an effect here of what looks like a raised surface. So from the side you can see that I'm actually clipping out the background. Now we have some controls, and I'll bring them open here, and one of these controls is the height ratio, and I can take this and I can push it even further, and as we look now you can see that when I get very low, it all turns into this watery weird mess, which is expected. However, we can confirm that we're actually, say this gold line right here with the trim and everything, I can cut that out completely. I can cut through it, as you can see right there. It's now behind the part that's the gem, and if I take this even higher, I'll push it even further. Okay, I can keep pushing this up and it will clip it out. Now as you can see, it gets really wavy and warpy, so you don't want to push this too far. There's a couple of things. You can take this in crazy amounts, and now all of a sudden that actually looks pretty damn 3D. You can see on this side I can see the little nipple piece, but I can't see it on the other side. It's behind the geometry. Same thing over here. Now you also notice that where I'm no longer using this material, because this is a different material right here, that it completely cuts off, which is actually to be expected. So on the one hand, you can do some really amazing things. On the other hand, we have a very hard set of limitations here. However, what those limits are based on your use case scenario, because in some cases, for instance in here, since I can't really get my camera to the left or to the right too far to the side, this insane height ratio push value here, like I'll take it even stupider. If I can't get any closer than this, and I can't move any farther away than this, there's nothing stopping me from doing this. If my camera won't reveal that it's a total glitch problem like this, if I can keep my camera like this in this general area, man, it's perfect. There's nothing wrong with it. I don't even think I need to have all the crazy steps. I mean, yeah, it gets kind of warpy. However, again, I'm allowing my camera down here to go to an extreme of an angle, and here. So I wouldn't put that material there or there. I would only put it here, and I wouldn't let my camera go too low, and I wouldn't let my camera go too high. But keeping my camera around here, you get away with some pretty cool stuff. It kind of optically illusions itself. You get these weird shapes that come out of it, but again, this is due to the steps. So if you're really concerned, you can go very high, and you can actually go Dumbo high, and it adds 8,000 steps. However, you don't want to go too crazy with that. Because it can eat your FPS. I think you have to start really punching values in the face before you really critically kill FPS. But you can see I'm down into the 20s now. And then when I put these back, I'm up in the 40s. Okay, but it's a quality versus performance ratio. And here's the thing: the default here is 0.08. This is not supposed to be something that you're trying to use to create geometry that the player can like navigate around or something like that. This is for effect. It's especially super helpful for decals. Any kind of decal that is supposed to either penetrate or add volume to a surface. A parallax occlusion mapped decal, in my opinion, is not just the best, it's just the way to do it. Certain ones where they just create a stain, that's one thing, but if you really want to knock like a chunk of this out, you could model a full-blown high-res 10 million polygon gigantic concrete hole here, and then do everything I did to create this. I just created this instead of that, okay? And then you'd have an alpha channel, a masked alpha channel around the whole thing, and then you could plop that down, and as soon as you slam that here, not only would it look like there's damage here, but it would look like the damage is like 4 feet thick. It's not like it's just, oh, you just kind of cracked the surface a little bit. No, you can make it look like it's busted all the way down in there. It's badass. So it's a really good thing to be able to do. The one thing that it does rely on is a good height map. A good height map is essentially, in my opinion, should be baked out of a 3D program. That's that's just the easiest way. If you already have a height map, that's the easiest way. But if you don't, you can bake your 3D model however you need to. You can see how very faint and very subtle this is. It's definitely not going from black to white. Okay, it's going from probably 10% gray to like 11% gray is what it feels like. I feel like I'm going blind looking at it, and I'm not going to keep it on the screen because I don't want to make you guys go blind. But it's a very faint thing. When I look at the model from the side, in case for those who know how to bake, if you want to know how far I pushed the cage out, it was literally to the exact top of the model. I didn't. You would think, oh, that would bake 0 to 1, giving you black to white, but no, that in fact gives you the correct amount of height difference. It's an offset of 0.5, meaning anything that got pushed out goes forwards of 0.5. Anything that went in when I would do that bake would have get pushed towards 0. So I would have had to have something behind my cage or my bake to get it to go towards 0, if that makes sense. That's the way that the baking is set up. So that's why we get a nice even tone, and that is the usable kind. A couple of points of advice. Try to avoid any kind of overhang. This is in the model, a 3D model. There is overhang behind this, and while it's fairly not a problem, it's not correct in any way. The fact is, though, it's a difference between this strip of pixels being one way and another way, and nobody's ever going to notice it, and it's small enough. So that kind of thing, however, needs to be hidden. But don't expect to be able to create like a lion head skull and then be able to like pull the jowls out and then get behind it and see it. It's not happening. It doesn't. Obviously, this is just a surface thing. So anything, anything underneath, just think of parallax occlusion mapping as something that you need to digitally 3D print, and if you build it that way, you are going to be safe. Just remember, 3D printers can do overhangs, but they have to be gradual. Here, the rule is worse than that. You can have them, but they're not going to show up, and you're going to get maybe weird results. However, if you were to map a sphere in front of a plane and bake that down where the sphere was not interpenetrating halfway, the sphere was in fact all the way out in front, and you baked that, you would only get the surface of the front of the sphere just the way I would have here, where I actually had it halfway placed into the plane. You'll get the same normal map. However, back here behind it will not be whatever color this ended at, blended out. It will be 50% or whatever, and then go straight to black. Or this will actually, to be honest, it'll be out at 1. It'll be, because it's pushed out really far, it'll be very white, and then at the edge of it, it will be exactly 50%. So the illusion that you will get inside of the parallax occlusion mapping is a radical offset of your background when you move things around. So no matter what you do, you're going to get a swim. because you have disconnected your transitions. It's hard to explain, but you have to think of this in just 3D terms. You know, these things are actually like kind of molded together, and these are molded together. If you simulate it so that this right at the edge of this is 2 feet in front of this, when you would turn, it would react like that. So either this is going to get shifted, the ring would get shifted really fast in front of you with the background not moving at all, or if you were close to the reference plane, it would be the opposite of that. So that's why, like I said, just try to avoid overhanging and dramatically things. Don't think that you can create a battle scene and just stand it in front of a plane and render it, and it's going to come out looking cool like it was sculpted into the wall. It will not look like it's sculpted into the wall. It'll look like a glitch. I've tried it. What you have to do is, if you're going to do that, you have to create your battle scene. You have to take all the actors, you have to flatten them, you have to place them so that they're in the wall, halfway in the wall, so only the parts that you want to have showing are showing. You have to treat it as if it is a sculpt in reality. That's the only way to get the height map to actually work. In all cases, like I said, if you're limiting the camera, you have a lot more room, but in most cases, we're like in a 3D, you know, first-person shooter or something, and we don't have that ability. So we don't push the height ratio too far because it just falls apart, okay? It's just disgusting. So, you know, I found in this case, in my case, that 0.4 was the beyond breach limit that this was pushing it. This, for me, 0.4 was when I had to, if I hit 0.4, I have to restrict my camera, because the problem with 0.4 is that while it looks okay here, it actually does fall apart low, very badly, very badly. So the default doesn't actually really fall apart at low, if you can see here, and you do get some of the depth, but it's very flat. I can occlude that nipple, but I can't, you know what I'm saying? It's not that much depth. So it's a difficult balance to do this, and it depends. And also, you can take the height ratio negative. I can push that way in if I want to. This model, this particular model, doesn't lend itself for this at all. It falls apart very quickly, in my opinion. It wasn't made for that. Okay, so I wouldn't do it this way unless it had none of these details. As you can see quite clearly, it's very ill. But coming out, you can see it starts to behave. Even though it gets sloppy when I get really high, it is actually behaving. Down here, it falls apart immediately. Immediately. Already, it's just a mess here as soon as I went negative because of the way that my height map is. So that's one thing I found too, is that, you know, I found that, you know what, if I push it out, it has to stay coming out. Like if I'm reversing it, just doesn't work. If I wanted this to be something that was pushed inwards, I'd have to make them some kind of plaque like this here that was designed to get cut out of the wall instead, to be in its own little thing, and that's just how it is. So I have found, you know, 0.2 is okay, is a fairly decent trade-off between how close you can get to the ground, because I can get to the ground here pretty good and it feels pretty good. This feels pretty 3D to me. I have to get much lower than this to really have it fall apart, and to be honest, over here, even though it is being cut off by the fact that it's not on the geometry back there, you can see here, if I go very low, you can see where I'm still restricted to my surface, correct? So we're always going to be like that. But when I barely get to the breach point, it doesn't feel as bad over here as it does right here up close. The things I'm seeing around here, you know, is getting a little wavy. But I mean, like, I am way down on the ground, right? Eye level for a regular character is up here, you know? So there is quite a bit of room, and in order for me to get that kind of glancing angle from up here, I got to be way over here. So that was why I actually I want to show this spot right here. These spots are all the same material. So if you look at it, when I take it from the side, if I take this height ratio up really high, I'll crank the max steps just so it looks a little prettier, but I would never use this in game. But for now, we'll just do that. So it looks pretty pretty. And what you can see is the problem quite clearly. These are here, no problem. I can see the whole dome, everything. As long as the material continues down the surface, I'm okay. But you see I'm losing these. So if I take these out here and I were to plug that material onto them, you would see I'd fill those in. Okay, and you can see here how this one's missing, right? So it's definitely just a texture surface material effect. We want to make no mistake that we have some things that we need to take into account. But there it is, parallax occlusion mapping. And that's it in effect. Now how to actually work, how to do it is easy. And it's actually the reason I didn't want it to make it like I wasn't going to cover how you do it. The fact is that you don't do anything. You just plug this thing in. The parallax occlusion mapping uses ray tracing to find something that you would have never found on your own. I'm talking to myself, not you guys. So just plug in what's necessary. Now these are the three. I've pulled these apart. The three connections here are paramount, absolutely 100%. You can't really get away from it. First off, your height texture. You need to make sure that you have your alpha channel. This one here is plugged into height map channel. Just which channel your height map texture uses. But here's the thing, it uses the alpha channel by default. And personally, I don't use the alpha channels, so I plugged this in. You could make this a parameter if you wanted to, because maybe you have them in different ones if you wanted to make a master parallax occlusion mapping PBR material. Because essentially, aside from some hue shifts and things that I'm doing for the tiles, which are just in general for the system, for the actual look of this particular material, ooh, that's kind of weird. There's nothing that I've done that's any different. I branched off a base color so I could have some controls for the colors, and that's it. Everything else plugs straight in. And then parallax occlusion mapping, you take the parallax UVs and you just plug it into the UVs of any texture that you're using that needs to get mapped. Any and all. They all need it. Everyone. Normal, all of it. And then I added max and min steps because you saw how it can fall apart if you start going too crazy. I mean, obviously, these are set for a reason. It will lag and whatnot. You can't go just balls out on that. I gave myself my own parameter. I added this myself and multiplied just for a tiling so that I could change the UVs. So just add a UV coordinate. That's a quick key for that is U. Just hold U and click. And then multiply that by your own parameter, and now I can tile the UVs any way I want. So like the tiles over here, let's say tiling, I want to say like 0.5, and you can see now these are the outer tiles are twice as big. And the parallax occlusion mapping, by the way, is working on this too. It doesn't get broken. So if I actually do it on the sunstone and I say tiling of say 4, you can see the parallax occlusion mapping is still working no problem all across the board everywhere. So that UV2 input here just takes that. Now it's just looking for the UVs, which is just a V2. You can use world position if you want. You can do anything you want here that you would normally do in UVs. Now the question is, can you make this pan and stuff? I don't know. I haven't tried that yet. I think you can. This is just a straight up UV pin as far as I'm concerned for now, but I may find out differently on that. Reference plane was defaulted to 1, and the way I have it baked, mine are set to 0.5. And I'll show you what happens here. Let's take Manny here. You can see I put the material on him just for fun. If I zoom around his feet, you can see that he's planted. He's standing on this part of the material. His toe's right on this line of gold. Okay? And it never leaves the line of gold, no matter which way I look at it. He's planted right on the ground. However, if I go to the tiles here and I change the reference plane here to the default of 1, and now I look around him, you can see immediately that I'm no longer anchored to the ground. I now feel like I'm like 2 feet on top of it, higher than it, right? That's what it feels like. So the reference plane needs to match your reference plane that you baked at, and for me that was 0.5. Okay, and as soon as I do that, and then my positives and negatives are all lined up to the way I need them, and I have perfect anchorage. I don't have any slip anymore. Even when I take the height ratio to too high. It's watery and slippy and stuff, but his foot's still not coming off of that bar, that gold line. Okay, so the reference plane is there. It does do weird stuff on crazy angles here. You can see with a crazy amount. This kind of effect isn't exactly friendly towards curved geometry. Okay, it's much friendlier on flatter geometry, and again, I have this set up way too high, so I put that to 0.08, which is the default, which even when you get close doesn't really fall apart. However, you can still get kind of a harsh mess here. You know, you can see how it's all blending together. So it needs to be used with care. I don't want to say so much with caution, however it does need to be used with caution, but it needs to be used with care in terms of the performance and the look, because both are a bit of a balance. You need to get the synergy correct, and then I think, you know, it'll work out just fine. As you can see here, I did up the samples here. You can see the stretching effect, but you can also clearly see the occlusion of the tiles behind it. Oh, it's just so good looking. Look, there's a whole tile there. I'm practically cutting out. I can block the whole damn thing. It's not there anymore. Try this. If you try this with bump offset, all you get is a smearing of all this stuff over in the corner, and that's it. It sort of works, but you're very restricted in your depth. This does have shadow ability too. I haven't tried that yet. I didn't plug anything in. Like I said, I kept render shadows as a boolean. I turned it on and it didn't do anything, so I think that it requires more of these things. So I personally just haven't plugged any of these things in, and it worked. I also want to make sure that you guys know that it does work as soon as you basically plug this in. Okay. It does need to be a texture object. Now, just a quick tip: if you want a parameter texture object, you cannot. Okay, here's the normal method, right? We got a texture sample, we right click, we turn to a texture object. Then we right click, we turn that into a texture object parameter, but that's not here. So what we do is we go texture object parameter. It's in the right click menu, you just have to add it yourself. Okay, and now you officially have a texture object. A texture object is what this is requiring. You can see right there, T2D, texture object containing your height map. Okay, and then you would plug that in. You see that plugs in just fine. However, if I try to plug in a regular texture, that does not plug in because it is not a texture 2D. Texture 2D means a texture object. I don't know what it means entirely. I do know it's how they're passed into functions. I don't know what it necessarily means to make it an object, and why it needs to be an object and can't just be passed in as a texture and have the function read the texture. I don't know that yet. Maybe somebody knows, and I would actually love to know that tidbit of information, and I will thank you. I'll give you a copy of Lost Planet 3 for the first person who tells me why the texture object has to be a texture object and can't be just a texture sample. Just the rule and the reason and what's the fundamental underlying thing. I need then, but however, if I'm going to be giving out a game for this, I don't. It's Lost Planet 3. I've never played it. I don't know if it's great or good or if anybody even wants it. For all I know, it's just useless. I don't know. I have a Steam key of it though. I bought a bundle pack and I only wanted one of the games out of the bundle, and Lost Planet 3 was one that I haven't given away already, so I'll give it away for free to whoever answers this question. But I do want the correct answer, please. However, I'll try to, as long as it sounds correct, I think I'm good with it. Alright, so hit pause, signing off. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one. Hopefully you enjoyed this. This is Parallax Occlusion Mapping. Very, very cool, fun, fundamentally useful feature for many things, but a little bit limited, and you got to be a little bit careful, but a lot of power here. A lot of power here. There is, if you guys want to see an example of something a little bit more interesting than what I've done with it, although I think this is kind of pretty, I don't think it's all that technically interesting looking. Some of there's a marketplace decal, parallax occlusion mapping decals, and that is a great case use example of some of the really, really fundamentally realistic and awesome things that you can do with this. Especially if you have some kind of like 3D scanning software where you can actually like bake out like point cloud data. If you could get down in there with a camera, you could mass produce that kind of stuff pretty quickly and produce a pretty substantial library really quickly. I changed pretty to really just for you. Hit pause, signing off. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one.